the topics tonight as we go into the reasoning. But I do ask the eye if the eye can just give I a little note, at least 10 minutes before the show. I want to show the clip because I don't want to forget the clip there. That's promoting the upcoming event. You see? Rastafari Rising. So as we forward, first thing I want to touch upon is the word sound of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I and his reasoning upon the granting of the Constitution of Ethiopia, Rastafari. And we find that it is most significant and very much important because even in these countries here into the West, you find that they call the Constitution of the United States of America or the United Snakes of America is the supreme law of the land. You see, it's called the supreme law of the land. And all of these states that are involved in the Union acknowledge the Constitution of the United States as the supreme law of the land. You see? And we're going to get into that. But before we go even into that, I just want to reason upon His Majesty's establishment of the Constitution in Ethiopia and the granting of the Constitution in Ethiopia. And it's very significant because His Majesty now, we know, is the sovereign. He is a sovereign, is the sovereign. And in order to understand when I is reasoning about law, the I really have to understand the whole fullness of what is sovereignty. You see, that is very key and very much important that you understand the fullness of sovereignty. Because within that said fullness of sovereignty is contained the fullness and the reality of all rights, our sovereign rights, our natural right, original organic rights. You see? Yeah, natural. So before we go into that now, we're going to read His Majesty's word sound. Because we say that the name of Emperor Haile Selassie I will always be dominant in the Ethiopian history. This is particularly so in connection with the legal and the constitutional changes which he has instituted in the millennial history of the country. In this record, July 16, 1931 is particularly significant. On that memorable day, of his own volition, and even against strong conservative opposition, His Majesty Haile Selassie I granted to the Ethiopian people the first written constitution ever, Rastafari. In the succeeding years, His Imperial Majesty the Emperor built upon the basis of the 1931 Constitution, which is a system of law and legal and judicial system that transformed the modern Ethiopia. And on the occasion of the Silver Jubilee of his coronation, again, of his own free will, His Majesty granted to Ethiopia a revised constitution which consolidated the gains over the previous 24 years and gave the people greater participation in their government through the making of the lower houses of parliament and a popularly elected body. Subsequently, His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I had the laws of the country codified and thus strengthened the further legal and judicial systems of Ethiopia, Rastafari. Because we know that within the history of Ethiopia, we have a tradition called, on the legal code called the Feta Negas. You see? The Feta Negas translates to be the law of the kings, or the law of the kings. You see it? Feta Negas, the law of the king. Now, within ancient Ethiopian tradition, the laws of the emperor were based upon the traditional laws through the Feta Negas. Most people have heard of the book called the Keber Negas. Now, the Keber Negas is called the Book of the Kings, where it now outlines the lineage and the tradition of the establishment of the kingdom, or the link between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba and their son Menelik I and the transition of the lineage of the throne until the time of Emperor Haile Selassie I. You see? Rastafari. So now, His Majesty, word, sound, and power on the decreeing of the granting of the Constitution. You see? Now, you have a lot of countries who have a so-called, or had countries, or there are countries wherein now they have so-called kings or sovereigns, and these countries don't have constitution. You see, but here you have an African country, an absolute monarch with absolute power. You see? Absolute power, granting unto his people, the African people, a constitution wherein now shows the people the fullness of their obligation and responsibility to shoulder also in the burden of government and the deciding the future of their country and their people. You see, this was very historical. For you find that many other countries where you have an absolute monarch with absolute power, it's whatever that person says goes. It's unquestioned, it's unchallenged, you have no rights. You see? But His Majesty, to show you the love and the compassion and the insight and the vision, Rastafari established a constitution, because we know that things must grow. His Majesty says, we, Haile Selassie I, Emperor of Ethiopia, having been called to the empire by the grace of God and by the unanimous voice of the people, and having the crown and the throne legitimately and by anointing according to the law, are convinced that there is no better way of manifesting the gratitude which we owe to our Creator, who has chosen and granted us His confidence, than to render ourselves worthy of it by making every effort so that he who comes after us may be invested with this confidence and may work in conformity with the laws according to the principles established. Having in view the prosperity of the country, we have decided to draw up a constitution which safeguards such prosperity based upon the law, and we have hope that this constitution will be the source of the well-being for Ethiopia, that it will contribute to the maintenance of our government and to the happiness and to the prosperity of our beloved people, that it will give satisfaction to all. Having expressed and made it clear our will, we have accordingly decided to grant this Constitution. The Constitution, which is to serve as the basis in the future and in the maintenance of the Ethiopian government and of the laws which are based on it, and the means of applying such laws once resolved, will itself set forth the necessity of the measures suitable for ensuring its maintenance, in order that this Constitution of our state may remain